Welcome everyone to this week in Svelte. Today from a different set. I'm sorry for the audio eventually, and for the screen it might feel a bit weird, but I'm from a different home. So welcome everyone to this week in Svelte, episode 145. Today we have a showcase, which I'm very happy about it. I was chatting right now, it will be about IETNet, which for the one that doesn't know, it's called it's the, I don't know how these things are called. I think it's a shorthand for internationalization, which is a very long word. So let's jump right into the changelog so we can actually then move to the interesting bit. Starting with Svelte 5.56.4, June 23rd, and we don't have any much more about this, so let's actually see what was released. So we have fix strip question marks from optional parameters in script lang ts, so generated JavaScript is valid. So this was a problem more with ESWrap, if we want, in the sense that it also was required in Svelte, but basically the point is when you were doing question marks, so the problem is in ESWrap, which is the thing that we use to convert the JavaScript AST that we build into JavaScript, initially question marks were not printed at all, but in the new version of ESWrap, they were printed, which meant that now the generated code was broken because it was using a question mark. So we now also strip the question marks. We removed a bunch of TypeScript nodes. We remove a bunch of TypeScript nodes directly in Svelte compiler, and we now also remove this. Also, fun fact, the same optional that it's inside parameters is the same TypeScript node that it's in the optional chaining. So we actually had to differentiate between the two and not remove the optional chaining. This is also interesting. Don't notify search param subscribers when the URL changes without affecting the search streams. So search params are basically a subpart of the URL, and in the reactive subpart, in the reactive part of the URL, so we have a reactive URL in Svelte and we have a reactive search param in Svelte, and obviously the URL it's using the search params. And the issue was that when the URL changed, even if search params were the same, they were still notified, which meant unnecessarily they were rerunning unnecessarily. So it's now fixed. Always unset reactivity context after restoring it. This is just something during the async await dance that we do. We restore the reactivity context, but it was never unset again. And this could lead to some situation where the reactive context was there, even if it was not meant to be there. Include wrapping parentheses in const declarator and position. I'm curious what this is about. Const x, blah, 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 and any const initializer is wrapped in parentheses. Produced a variable declarator whose end fell before closing. Okay. So basically, the end, in the parser, the end of this expression was before the final parenthesis, and this meant issues. And I'm pretty sure that this was either a prettier or an ESLint issue, because Baseball Gamma is the responsible, the maintainer for ESLint and prettier Svelte, and so probably he had, should be 104. So I guess it was a simple fix, but yeah. And that's actually it for Svelte. We don't have any more release for Svelte. I think we might have, yeah, we have a new release for Svelte Kit with a feature. So that's, oh, that I actually used this feature. Yeah, so, okay, so let's talk about avoid unnecessarily overriding a user's Vite8 code splitting settings. So if you are using Vite8 code splitting settings, before it was overriding it, I guess now it is not doing it anymore. I don't know why it was necessary before, but now it's not necessary anymore. And so now you can actually declare your own code splitting strategy. Support exact optional property types for optional form schema fields. So this should be, maybe I'm wrong, but it should be a TypeScript option. Let me zoom in once more. So like it was closing this thing, this issue here. Yeah, okay, so in tsconfig, like this is a compiler option you can add in the tsconfig, and it was causing error inside the form validation. So it was throwing some error, and now it's actually, you can actually use it. And these exact optional property types should be that you actually have to define, like when you declare optional property type, let's actually check just for good measure. tsconfig exact optional property types. So this should be that if you have an optional, you actually have to include undefined in the type. Whoa, yeah. So without this flag enabled, there are 3 values which you can set: dark, light, and undefined. Setting the value to undefined will allow most JavaScript runtime check the existence to fail, which is effectively falsy. However, this is quite accurate. Color theme override undefined is not the same as color theme override not being defined. For example, if you check color theme override in settings. So with this option, you have to set override or undefined. Yeah, type undefined is not assignable. So like, even if basically like without exact optional property type, you cannot do this. So like, if you don't have this option enabled, you can do settings.color theme override is equal to undefined, even if the actual type does not accept undefined. So you can omit the option completely, but you cannot set it to undefined. And by using exact optional property type, you cannot do this if you set exact optional property type, but you can do this if you don't set it. It's a bit convoluted, sorry. We also have a minor change, which is a new feature, which again, I actually used, which is prerender.handle invalid URL. Now, the reason why this was used is for a specific reason. So I don't know if if you are on Blue Sky, but most importantly, if you are into @proto. So there is this thing which is called standard.site, and standard.site is basically a lexicon for @proto, which basically define a publication. It basically define, I don't know why it's taking so long to load. Yeah, okay. It's basically a way to publish your blogs, right? So each one of these, for example, it's using standard.site. And if you publish a blog post, like if you publish a blog, you can actually use standard.site either to store your blog post on the @proto itself, like in your PDS, in your @proto, in your PDS, or you can just publish something to the standard site, and what the outcome of this is that your publication will be available either in those um, websites that reads from standard.site, or on Blue Sky. So I want to show you. You can see this. Like, this is something like it's someone that publish on standard.site. So for example, I recently used the feature because I upgraded my blog to be a standard.site publication. And so you can see that when I publish my blog on Blue Sky, I get this nice view publication below, which opens my blog. And all of this is done automatically because my my publication is because it's published on standard.site. However, there is one issue with that. If I open my blog, which is not this, I need to add. Sorry, oh, that's embarrassing. If I open this, you can see. Let me see if you can see actually. So if I open page source, there is all sort of stuff, but there is some important bit here, which is this thing here. Link rel site.standard.document href is equal this thing here. Now, this small bit is basically it's a way for standard site to identify that this publication, like this document, is linked to this publication, basically. So like this is just a way so that standard site, like Proto apps, can verify that this blog is really, like, I have the power to change this blog, and so I can connect this blog to to my publication, right? However, sorry, let me open back again the source. There is one issue. This really looks like a URL, but it's not an actual URL. So if I copy this and I try to do, let's go to svelte.dev/playground. If I try to create a URL with this, it will fail. So let's see, const at URL is equal new URL this. Now, if I try to create this, you can see that URL, invalid URL, is a no. So the problem is that this, that very much looks like a URL, is not a URL because of these two characters here. And this is basically like, it's a did, which is an identity ID in Proto. So like, it's not like we can really change it. There are plans to change it, to change them. Like, for example, I think if you add one of these, now it's available. But the point is, this right now, it's not a valid URL because those two things here are not accepted as a URL. Now, the issue here is that SvelteKit will try to prevent you from adding a link to something which cannot be linked to. Like if you try to link to something that again is not a URL, SvelteKit will fail the build and say, hey, please don't link to this, because by the way, link also means something different. Like link, you can see here, we use link to preload your code, right? So that the page loads very easily. And so this link generally is something, it's a resource that actually needs to be embedded into your document. It's not something that is just there so that it can be verified. What this should be is really a meta property. Like it should be meta property, site standard document, content, this thing here. So There are discussions in place to change this so that you can actually like use the proper meta tag instead of a link, and that will fix this issue. But until then, like it was still a decent, not, I don't want to say workaround, because like it might happen, like you have an invalid URL that you want to add during pre-render, and this way you have more control over what to do when you are pre-rendering and you have an invalid URL. So if you use this, you can basically say, okay, this URL is fine, I don't care if it's not available, please go ahead and continue to build. So yeah, that's nice. Let's see, we have a new release of adapter node, which is avoid circular dependency between server initialization and hook retrieval that cause the app to crash on start. So this was a circular dependency when basically the server, basically when you build for Node, it was importing the server initialization and it was importing the hook, and this was a circular dependency, and so the app crashed. Correctly resolve the root directory on the server. Okay, that's nice. Ensure env prefix is defined. Env prefix should be the one, like it's a variable that define what's the public env that you can actually ship to the browser. And it's also updating the dependency specifically of SvelteKit. Okay, so this was nice. We have a new release of load config. Make it possible to pass a config file path directly. Load ESM version of Vite. So this package is basically like a small package that you can also use if you want to load the Svelte config, given, like basically it will find in your file system either a Vite config or a Svelte config. And if it is a Vite config, it will use Vite to load the config. If it is a Svelte config, it will actually just import the file and read the config. So we are using this in the language tools so that we can actually read your Vite config if you have one and use it inside the language server, for example. And now it's also possible to pass a config file path directly, because sometimes people actually use not the standard vite.config.js or vite.config.ts, but they could also pass something like, I don't know, custom.vite.config.ts, and then invoke Vite with that specific Svelte changelog. So this way, we basically have a way to know for which Vite config to look for. We also have a new release of the Svelte MCP, which is better wording for desired Svelte version. This is something that I have experienced myself. If you are building with agents and a Svelte MCP, they often have to like do multiple call because they read the version from the package JSON and they pass like a specific version, like 5.63.3. And instead this should just be like 4 or 5. Like we don't care specifically about the Svelte version. We might need to do something like that in the future, but for the moment, we just care about if it's Svelte 4 or Svelte 5. We have a new release of ESLint plugin Svelte. With a minor change, add Svelte not at const tag rule. This is because obviously we recently released the declaration tags. So obviously, like only really use this if you are in a greenfield project. Like this will probably not be included in the default rules that are enabled, because a lot of people still use at const in their project. But with this, like you can also make sure that you don't have any at const when you can use const and derived in the declaration tags. Given that this will be deprecated. Fix valid prop names in kit pages, drop errors from allowed page props in Svelte 5 to follow SvelteKit. Yeah, okay. So this was something to do with SvelteKit. We have a new release of the extension, which is mostly just like the same thing, like stop excluding workspace under dot prefix ancestor, remove lodash. That's nice. It was very nice to remove something. Don't crash on array binding holes in the structured export. I don't know if you know, but you can do something like this. And this basically means that from this object, you are destructuring the D property, and then the D property is an array, and you are getting the first and the last element of the array. I mean, not the first and the third element of the array. And you are literally skipping the second. So this is valid JavaScript, and it was not working inside the extension, and now it is. Svelte check, those are probably the same. Correctly parse TSGO experimental API flag. Okay. Add config option. So this is the other part of the load config. So you can specify where the config, how the config file is named. Svelte check TSGO support with experimental API. So you can actually use TSGO now with Svelte check. It's an experimental API, but you can use it. Yeah, this is kind of the same. And we have a new release of the Svelte language server, which most likely it's the same. Yeah, it's always the same. Let me see. We have a new release of Svelte 2 TSX, which is this one, don't crash on array bindings. And 2 new release of ESWrap, which is again the tool that we use to move from AST to JavaScript. Preserve optional identifier, which is what needed to be fixed in Svelte before. Preserve required parentheses that were being dropped, changing minute or producing invalid output. Nested unary operators parenthesized optional chain and await as the left operand of this. So basically there were some parentheses that were dropped by ESWrap and now they are not anymore. We have preserved the required parentheses in 3 more cases that change the meaning of produced invalid output. ESWrap is another library that like Rich started to wrote, and it's it's incredibly difficult to do something like this. One might think that once you have the AST, it's very easy to print that IST, and it's not. Like, it's very complex job to do because you have to keep track of like which characters you are writing, where, which lines. Like it's a mess, and so yeah. Say thanks to Rich also for this. Derive needs parents precedence check from the precedence table instead of hard-coded number. Preserve more TypeScript markers when printing. Add parentheses required by specific grammar position. Once again, parentheses. Print valid TypeScript for asserts, predicate, qualified namespace, and computed signature keys. So once again, if you are printing TypeScript, there were some syntax that was lost, basically. Okay, I think we have done with the changelog, so we can now move to the interesting bit. So I'm gonna switch to the guest show and present you to Kdus, right? Did I say it right?
Yeah.
So Kdus is the developer of Wuchale, which is an IETN library, and basically like what like IETN again stands for internationalization, and it's basically a way to like make your app available to more people, right? So he built this very nice library. Stanislav also made a video on it, but I mean, I'll let him present his work, and I'll fade away. And then, if you have any questions, drop them in chat, and we can have a little Q&A after this. So please, Kdus, go ahead and present your thing.
Thank you, Paolo. Hello, everyone. My name is Kdus, and I am the author of Wuchale. For those who don't know, let's start with this. So Wuchale is a library, a toolkit. I don't know what to call it because it does different things. It's not just a library that you import functions from. It's also a command line tool. It's also a Vite plugin. So I think the more appropriate word for it is a toolkit. So the main goal is uh, without changing your code in any way, having it automatically internationalized. So the idea came uh, from a previous application I did. I'm from Ethiopia, so uh, I worked at the biggest public transportation provider in Addis Ababa, the capital, and in there I had to make it support the local language, Amharic. And in that, as the application was previously written in Preact, I had to use some library that was available for React, and the best, the less friction way for that was Lingui. And then I started looking for a replacement for Lingui in Svelte because I was I was experimenting with Svelte recently, and I really liked the cleanliness of the code, but I couldn't find a replacement for Lingui, and that's where the idea came from. So I started experimenting with it with a similar idea, but then it grew into a more fully featured no code change idea. Because in Lingui, you at least have to use components, special components, but mostly you also extract automatically. But here I wanted to get rid of even that. So uh, the the core idea is this: no code changes, and then the second idea is the smallest possible bundle size, because I will talk about this later. But the current solutions that exist today, as outside of Wuchale, of course, use a less optimal way of packaging your catalogs. I'll talk about this as well. But yeah, here's that's the introduction. Let's talk in more detail in practice, because it's more easier to show than to speak many words. So let's get started with Svelte. I have a bare bones Svelte application, Svelte Kit application here already set up, just a bare bones. Like I just created with SV and a bare bones. So just to show you, just a spin up a dev server, and you should be familiar with this, right? So the goal is I will show you how to internationalize this, and I'll show you what you can do with Wuchale. So let's stop the dev server here, and let's add Wuchale to it. So we'll go to the SvelteKit setup here, and we'll install it. So we just need to get two packages. We install it, and then the next thing is we configure Vite. Like we import the Vite plugin. As I said, it's a Vite plugin, so we just import the Vite plugin. Yeah, this is the default Vite configuration for SvelteKit, and we just import Wuchale, and that's it. For the default configuration, that's it. And then the next thing is we create a configuration file. I'll talk about this later, but let's see. Um, so uh, this is just the default configuration. It supports Svelte files and also TypeScript and JavaScript files. To support both, we just need these ones. And then the last one is we run it for the first time so that it gets started to get to get it scaffolded. So we just so what this does is a few things. The first thing is it creates a few scaffolding files. Let's see what it creates. Like the default configuration takes this. No, I mean this. This is the home of Wuchale, if you will, under src. Look, as by default, you can configure it, but by default, this is where it puts all the files it creates. And inside there, we have the catalogs, the PO files. The PO file is a standard file used to store internationalization catalogs, basically translations. So, for example, we have two languages, English and Spanish. And if we have a look at the Spanish, this is what it looks like. We have some header information, and then we have the original text, and then the text that's supposed to be the translation for each key. And this is what it extracted from, yeah, when we ran it. It extracted these. From this file, it extracted "Welcome to Svelte," and from the same file, it extracted the main text that we see here. Visit blah blah blah. And then the other one is the loader files. These are the files that house the logic of how the catalogs are loaded, not the PO files, but the compiled catalogs. So what it does is these are for human consumption, for humans to work with, but these are not the files loaded during runtime. For the runtime, it compiles these files into compact versions. So what they look like is these ones. So the .wuchale file is the runtime auto-generated files that are not supposed to be touched by humans. So we should work around these files. So if we have a look at the compiled files, for example, for the Spanish, it's so far it's not translated yet, but it just houses an array of strings, or an array of strings and numbers. That's all. No keys. This is what I meant by the most optimal way of loading things, because the other libraries, name any library, name any internationalization library, they always have the same kind of format. They always have an object or some kind of mapping between keys and values. Wuchale doesn't have that. It just stores the values, the strings. How does it know which ones to access? That's where the compilation step comes in, because it can coordinate the array locations, the indexes, with the actual strings and how they're used. So it can know that the first value is a bare string, but the second value is actually a composite made up of smaller strings, and then even smaller, nested. I'll talk about this later, but it can coordinate during the compilation step. It can coordinate many things and output the smallest possible bundles for the translations. And then the other files are the proxies, which are actually helpers for the loaders, but are actually optional. You can opt not to use them and implement your own loader. But this is more or less like this. The file secrets are this. So we have set it up almost. We're here during the setup, and the final step is setting up how we integrate it into our application's logic, because we have to decide how the catalogs are loaded, what happens when we change the state or the URL, where we store the state and everything. It has to be our own choice. So let's set that up. So for the Svelte kit, we have to see here. So Svelte kit has two two parts, one that runs on the server for SSR and SSG, and another one for the client. So we need different setups for these two setups. So the first one needs the hooks file. So we'll just copy it and then paste it in the hooks file. So we'll just use a JS file because it's typed in JS doc, but we could also use TypeScript. So what it does, what this does is, let me show you. Yeah. So what this does is, I've mentioned these files, the loader files. So the loader files are actually two per adapter. I mean, by adapter, I mean we have different adapters for the adapters are per syntax. They can be per syntax. So Svelte files are different from JavaScript files, so they're interpreted differently. And we need two files per adapter. So for JS, we need two, and for Svelte, we need two. One for the client and one for the server. And for the server, we are in the hooks file, so this one's in the server. So for the server, we import both the adapter files as global imports, uh, and then we just call load locales. So what this does is it just imports the catalogs synchronously because there is no need to do any async loading. We're on the server, there is no delay that we should be worried about. There is no bundle size that we should be worried about. So we just load them directly at the top. And we don't have to worry about bleeding one request's data to another. Sometimes we have to make sure that when one person requests an English site and another person requests a Spanish site, the English person's settings don't leak into the other person's settings. So how do we make sure of that? We run it with this. We run the function, the request inside of this function, and this actually uses Node.js's native support for isolating executions of functions inside of separate contexts. I think it's called async local storage or something. Yeah, so it uses that. So we just need to run it inside of to run the whole resolve function inside of that context. And inside of that context, we have the locale. So it's already loaded up there. So we have everything in the server. So this is all we need for the server side. And for the client side, the way we load it is in the layout. So in here, in this file, we have to put this logic. I'll explain it. So inside of inside roots, yeah, JS. So for the client, since the layout runs both on the server and on the client, we have to make sure that it runs inside of the browser, not on the server. On the server, it's already taken care of. So inside the browser, we check it, and then yeah, we get the locale. Sorry, I didn't mention where we store the settings. By default, for this example, we choose to store it inside of query parameters. So, for example, let's say we visit this com/locale. No, I mean like this, and then en or es, something like this. This is what we're doing, but we could also choose to do anything else. So this is, but for now, this is what we're doing. So continuing, we get the locale from the search params, and if it's not there, we just use English, and then we check, like this is, yeah, this array comes from a file that Wuchale writes from the settings, so that we could use it during runtime, for exactly these reasons, to check if a locale is valid or not. It writes our settings locales inside of this file. So it takes this file, these values from the config, and we could import and use it in any way we want. This file is stored in here. This is the file. So we could import the locales anywhere we want, and we can use it. So we check if it's inside of there, and then we just load it. But how we load it is, uh, we import this utility from Wuchale itself. It's a setup utility that's designed for the loading of catalogs on the client. So for the server, uh, we have this load utils server, and for the client, the default load utils. These are just the provided utilities. We could also opt not to use them, and we can write custom loaders, as I said, inside of the loader files. But the loader files, the default ones, these are default loader files. They're written uh, to use the default way of loading things. So this is all we need, and now we have extracted everything, and we can run. So yeah, of course, we don't see anything different right now because nothing has been translated. So let's try something else. Try, let's stop the dev server, and let's try translating it. So I speak a little Spanish, so I'll try it. Uh, spell it. Yeah, and then let's see what happens. Yeah, and yeah, by default we're on the English side, so let's change to the Spanish side. Now we have something already translated. Mind you, we didn't touch the page file where this is written. The page file is still the same. We didn't touch it, but it got this, and then it got the translation from the translation file, and then compiled it to ES, like compiled it to this file. No. This part is not relevant. It's just for development HMR purposes. I'll show you this, but what gets compiled for production is just this for Spanish, and for English it's the original one, this one, right? So now we have the basic working. Now let's try something more interesting. So we have a simple element already translated. So let's talk about the config more. So the config, in the config, you can explain many things. So you start from the locales. So locales are basically the languages that you want to support. We have English and Spanish. The first one will be treated as the source language. By source language, I mean the language you write your Svelte files or any user visible message in original message in your source file. So for example, in our page file, we have welcome to SvelteKit, which is English. So the source language should be English, right? So, and the next locales will be the target languages that you want to translate to, right? And then next we have the adapters. Don't confuse these with SvelteKit's adapters. These are the parts, the responsible parts of the library Wuchale, which take care of specific parts of your code base. So, for example, the you can give these any key you want. This is just the default naming. So, Svelte, you can call this Svelte, and it will work. Just some identification with it, right? So for the main, we have Svelte. So we use different parts of Wuchale for different parts of the code, right? So for to support Svelte files, Wuchale has this package, Wuchale Svelte. And then to support JavaScript and TypeScript files, Wuchale has this adapter vanilla, which is already included in the base package, right? And we have other packages too, JSX and Astro, to support those files. We're talking about Svelte here. And then you can use the same kind of adapter multiple times to partition your application into many smaller parts. So in theory, we could use this like main and I don't know, like products, and we could use Svelte. And then inside of there, you could configure each adapter where you want to point it to and which loader you want to use it with. So we'll talk about loader later, but we could select the files. So files, we could give uh, different globe patterns. So src, main, uh, and blah 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 Svelte, right? So something dot Svelte. Like we could partition this, and products would be uh, working for files will be src products blah blah. We could partition our code base like this, right? First, yeah, it's already an array, right? So we could partition our code base like this, or we could also put everything, all the responsibilities uh, to the same adapter like we do here for the JS adapter. So for the JS adapter, this is the default config for Svelte files. For this reason, Svelte files have the same pattern more or less. So for example, something that starts with plus and then page or layout and JS or TS, or that same pattern but with server. So these files will be taken care of by the vanilla adapter, which can parse and transform JavaScript and TypeScript files. And this is for Svelte files. And that's about files. And the next thing is loader. Loader is how we choose to load the catalogs. As I said, the catalogs are just arrays exported from modules, and how we get them and how we manage uh, which one is loaded and when it's loaded, that can be some work, because there are many ways of loading catalogs. You could just import them directly, but that would mean they would be bundled to your application, all of them, no matter which language the user wants. An English user may get all 10 different languages for the same site, although they only need English, right? So I don't think that's a good idea, but some other libraries like Paraglide argue against that. They argue that it has to be weighed against the latency of making a new mistake, a new request in case of lazy loading. But that's not for the tool developer to decide. That's for the application developer, the user to decide. So I try to make Wuchale get out of your way. Just uh, provide the tools that you want to use to build anything, right? So it supports both synchronous and asynchronous loading, lazy loading. So You could use the provided loaders, and these are the default loaders, but you could also uh, opt to use custom, and then edit the loader files that I just showed you. Yeah, you could rewrite this in any way you want, and then it would never overwrite it. And that way you could control the whole logic of how it gets loaded, right? But for now, let's choose SvelteKit for Svelte and Vite for JS. These are the default loaders that get provided from Wuchale, right? So I think I haven't modified anything, right? And the other one is heuristics. This it's an important concept in Wuchale. Why? Because as you don't explicitly write any code related to internationalization, it has to automatically decide which string gets included and which gets excluded, right? So to decide that, there is there is a default heuristic. Uh, yeah, here. So there is a default set of rules, and yeah, there is a default set of rules, and you could override them as you wish, right? Just to get an overview, these elements are ignored by default. They're not touched. So style, path, code, pre, are ignored. Although they look like they contain text, they will most probably not are not meant to be extracted or translated in any way. But apart from those, all markup is extractable. So all text that you write in tags is extractable unless it's included inside of these tags, right? And in attributes, uh, the general idea is uh, something that includes uh, letters, readable letters, translatable letters, not numbers, uh, but letters. Those are extractable. So for example, this is extractable. Profile picture, letters that start with an uppercase letter, right? So this, since it starts with a capital C, it's extractable. But this is a class, it starts with the lowercase letter, and it's ignored. This is how it automatically decides not to touch the strings that shouldn't be touched. And this is uh, a link, a URL, something like that looks like a link, and it is extracted as a URL. We'll talk about URLs later, but it also supports URLs. And in scripts, kind of the same rule uh, as attributes. It looks for something that starts with an uppercase letter and then contains other letters and spaces, right? So it ignores console log. It doesn't translate something inside of this call or fetch. It ignores it. Uh, and yeah, if the first character is a lowercase or any non-letter character, unless it starts with a placeholder, uh, it is ignored, right? Otherwise, it's extracted. And an example is just a simple string like this that starts with an uppercase letter is extracted. Something that starts like this is ignored. Like if you read this, you understand more or less that uh, it can get 97% of the cases it gets things right. And what happens when it misses something that it should extract, or it includes something that should be excluded, you could override this rule, right? So there's two ways of overwriting. One is the global override. So you could write a custom heuristic function, uh, and then you could decide what to do with it, whether to include it or not, and if you should include it, how to include it as a URL or not. This is how you decide what to do with this here. So you could write something like this. So message, and then so message has these properties. The main thing you look for is this: the main text content is included inside of this. So it looks like something like hello, like it looks like something like this. It's an array because plurals are also supported. So in case of plurals, it could look like something like something day and something days, right? So you get an array of strings that could contain one or multiple strings, right, inside of this. And the other properties are more interesting. Property is this one, details. So inside of that, you get these informations, which attribute it comes from, if it comes from an attribute, which call it is found in. This is how it ignores console log, and what it's declaring. Is it declaring a function or not? Which element it comes from in case of an attribute, and markup text. Is it exported or not? Which file it comes from? Is the function nested or not? Many interesting things. And based on all of this, you could decide to include or ignore something. And then if you return undefined, it just means use the default rule for this, right? So you could target a very specific thing and leave the rest to the default. Like if MSG details call is something like console log, and you could return false. And then when yeah, it's something like this. So when you return false, it means ignore, but here you implicitly return undefined, and that means use the default rule. So you could target a really specific thing with this. That's one way of controlling what gets included or excluded. The other one is through comment directives. So these are comments you put in your code to get one by one control, right? So this is how it works. There are some comments to include or ignore things. You use include or ignore, like at WC and include or ignore. So to explain, to show how it works, we have an example here. So comments apply to the whole thing that comes after them, to the whole block. So this WC include applies to the whole switch block, not just to the first string it gets. So we have, when we get here, we find deleted, right? But since it's inside something that's after WC include, it's included against the default heuristic rule. And this is also included because it's inside the same switch block that's after WC include. But this is uh, inside of the switch, but you get another comment that tells you to ignore. And by default, according to the heuristic, it should be included. But since it comes the after the ignore comment, although it's inside the switch that should be included, the most recent one overrides the last one, and so this is ignored. And then now after the switch, everything is back to normal, and by default this is ignored, right? So this is how comments work. You put one comment before the thing that you want to override the inclusion or exclusion of, right? So you could, if you want, get really granular control over what gets included, but for the most part, you just leave it to the automatic rules, and then it does what the right thing is, and that's how it relieves you of the daily struggle of writing function calls or something. So we have talked about the compiled. Now this is a lot of concepts, I know, but now let's see something interesting, right? Let's see what if we give it. I'll delete this. I know what if we give it the we have set up an AI translation, and then we started. Now, remember, we have something untranslated. Visit this one. This part was not translated yet, but now it gave it to Gemini and got it translated. And now it's translated already. Like this is the Spanish, and this is the English. We didn't touch the translation for. Let me show you. If you remember, we didn't translate this. This is from Gemini. So what I want to show you is LLM translation is already really integrated with really good validation. So every interaction with the LLM is validated, whether it's valid or not. So if it's invalid, it is again asked. So it comes with a retry logic. It retries 30 times before giving up by default. And then, yeah, so it works during dev. So let me show you something. Yes, and now we're on the Spanish side. Let's add something like this. What do I want to say? Yeah. And we added a new text, and then as soon as we save it, it sends it to Gemini, gets it back, and updates it in real time during the HMR update. So we can develop in one language and see the updates in the browser in another language. That's the coolest thing I remember, right? So it works with LLM, and you can configure this too. Let me let me show you. Yeah, here. By default, since Gemini provides at least a few access, a few requests per day access, Gemini is by default included. So you just need to set the environment variable, and then it just uses it. But you could also disable it or customize it, right? So inside of the config, you could do this. So AI, and Gemini is just one default way that's provided out of the box, but you could also configure anything that any other LLM. You just need to handle the fetch requests and everything, but it provides the prompt, and then it expects another string. So it handles the parsing and validation and everything. So between those 2 points, between the prompt string and then the response string, you can do everything you want. So basically, without even Gemini, you could do this. So batch size. This is the number of keys included in a single request. So, for example, let's say 40, the maximum messages, and in parallel, it could make this many requests. So let's say 3, and no, think, translate. The main thing is this. So as you see, let me expand this. So it gives you the messages as a string and the system instruction as a string, and then it expects a string after an async execution. So you could implement messages and instruction. And then you could do anything you want with this, like await, fetch, and everything, and then return the response as a string, right? So return something like, of course, the response needs to be a JSON array, but that instruction is included in the inside of the system instruction. So yeah, don't know what it's complaining about. Yeah, it has to be async. So you could send this request to any LLM provider you want, and it just expects a string. But by default, the Gemini API is included, like how it's called and how it's parts, how it's yeah, how the execution goes is already included. So we could just call this and provide our customizations, like which model we want. This is we could give it any model that's supported by Google, and then we could also customize our batch size and everything, and that's it, right? And uh, how do we disable it? Even if we set the environment variable, we could use API key and set it to null. If we do this, is if it, yeah, yeah, yeah. If we do this, even if it's available as an environment variable, it will be default disabled. And we could also choose to give our API keys as a string here, but I don't think it's advisable. Oh yeah. So next we have, yeah, we go to the more advanced topic of how does this work, this thing, right? The nested part. So yeah, here. Right, so we started with this, which is a pretty simple thing. We run it. So we started with this. It's a simple text inside of um, a single tag, right? But we could nest this. So we we could do this, right? And then that would be here. Also, like of course, translated again using Gemini. Uh, but yeah, uh, how does this work? Well, so I so okay, let's see. So this element P has two children, one text and one another element B, right? So and then inside of B we have a text. So this algorithm is, if you ask me what's the core of Wuchale, this is it, right? How it handles the nested. You can nest as deep as you want. You can nest as complex as you want. You can do this like username, like name. You could define name here, and yeah, like so you could nest this even deeper. Uh, like you could go as complex as you want, and it would still not break a sweat, right? So uh, if you do this, it gets translated, and it still works. Like you can nest as deep as you want. You can go as complex as you want. It still handles it. And how does it look? This like what we just did. how does it look for the translator? Not that complex. I mean, of course, not straightforward, but it's not that complex, right? So these, I just used like simple things, but these could be components like with attributes, like something like that, like really complicated things, and it would still be the same. This thing, it would still be the same. It would still use the zero, like this thing would still be zero. So how it works is it just takes the deepest one, right? This, the deepest one, and then it keeps it on the side. It doesn't extract it right away, but it starts uh, because there is a text here, right? So a text next to an expression, an interpolation, right? So it keeps it on the side, it goes up, and there is a text with a nested thing, and then that means like, yeah, two is this one, right? So uh, it knows that there is an inner text inside of this when it's visiting this one, the inside of B, right? So it builds up from the inside out, and then from the outside, it it starts checking with the heuristic. So should the whole thing be included? If the heuristic says no, it goes deeper, right? And then it goes individually. Should this be included? And then if the heuristic says no, this is ignored, and then it goes even inside. So uh, the first the first time that it finds that's approved by the heuristic, it starts accumulating. It just takes that and then applies the edits to the files, right? So uh, when does it know where to start the and where to break the strings? uh, if you ask me, then that would be the mixture of raw text with nested tags, right? This is a good starting point. So this is a raw text, this one, mixed with something like this. And it wouldn't get mixed with something that's here. Like, so it here, this would be a separate message, and these would be a single message. So as soon as there is a mixture, it just collects the whole thing and treats it as a single message. So uh, that's the the most complicated part of Wuchale is this one, how it handles it. Uh, and then now once it was possible to do this, everything became uh, a progression from here from there. So and yeah, one of the other things that I was asked earlier on, because it wasn't implemented that good early on, was pluralization, but now it's provided as a really well supported case, right? So pluralization is supported in two ways. You can choose which way you want, but here. So there are two ways of doing pluralization. One is the built-in way. So basically, you just write inside of an expression something like plural, like for example, but you have to write first. You have to write a function, your own function, with the name plural. So function plural. I have a plan to include this function inside of the generated files so that you don't even have to write it. But for now, in the next version, this will be a bit different, less work. But for now, you define the plural that takes as the first argument the number of things, right? So, and the second will be the candidates. So that will be a string, an array of strings, and has the last argument the rule which decides which candidate to take. So, this will be clearer when it's used, but for now, it will be like it will take the number, and if the number is 1, then take the first one, otherwise take the second one. And we have the rule, and now we return the candidate. Which candidate? It's decided by the rule of the number. And replace, this is something custom you do, but just as an idea, replacing the hash with the number to a string. So yeah, just I think the formatting is a little out of whack, but yeah, I think you could see it now. So we basically we run the rule to get the index of the suitable candidate, and then we select the candidate based on that index and replace the hashtag with the number. So how do we use this? Plural, and then, for example, 3, and then let's say 3 is actually a static value, but most of the time we don't know which one it is. That's why we need this plural function anyway. But let's say it comes from a variable. So num equals, I don't know, 3, right? So num, and then if it's 1, just say 1 day. And if it's multiple, then say this many days, right? This is how you use it. That's all. Like from now, Wuchale changes the the function, like how it's called. So it will override. I will actually show you what it changes to, but for now, let's see what it does. So it will get translated, and I think I have an error. This is a bug, actually. I will get it fixed. But yeah, but the idea is the idea is if the number, I mean, this should be yeah, we could actually replace this with this. Yeah. All right. So the idea is, I mean, we could update this and it would be undia, right? And then when it's 3, and how does it work? It extracts it into this. I mean, PO file supports many pluralization, of course, like this. Like you just specify when it's the first one would be this, the second one will be this, right? And then now let me show you what it looks like actually, how it rewrites the code. You could do this to see the transformed version. We have to actually commit this so that we could go back. Let's, yeah, we don't need it. No. Yeah, let's initialize a git repo. And then anyway, So sorry for this. I have no idea. Anyway, anyway, all right. So now let's see what it changes to. So npx maybe modify main. So we want it to modify the Svelte files on disk, but this is just to see what the files change to, but you shouldn't do this when your work tree is not clean. So you should make sure that you can go back. But actually, let's do that. Let's see if we could go back. So yeah, we could go back. Oh. All right. So we yeah, we could go back. So just always make sure before doing modify, make sure that you could go back, right? So now we can see what the files changed to. So npx main, and now this is what the what it rewrites the files to, right? So let's go over it a little bit. So the first thing is it imports the functions from the loaders, right? So the loaders we have discussed before. It gets the load functions from the loaders, both the reactive and the plain. But for Svelte, it just needs to use the reactive inside of the derived. So this is how it stays reactive. When you change locales, you don't have to reload the whole page because it does all of this in the background. So it gets the runtime, and from the runtime, it defines it gets all of the strings that are declared in the compiled catalogs. So this now you see this number. This means get the element at index 2. This is how it organizes everything while also using arrays. We don't need string keys and be like have big bundles. We just use numbers to access elements of arrays, and that's how it makes the compiled catalogs stay small. This is an idea that comes from protocol buffers. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but the idea is the same. Like uh, you one way is you use JSON when making requests, and in JSON you also include the keys like name, blah blah, and age, something something. But if you use protocol buffers, you don't need the keys at all. Like you just put the information one after the other, and then the endpoint, the destination, knows how to decode them. That's the same idea implemented here, right? So this transformed code knows where to get the strings from, which index to use, because it's transformed by the same thing that makes the compiled catalogs. So we have the second, like to see here, it should actually be Paulo. Yeah, Paulo. Let's see. So at index 2 we have 0, 1 in here, and this is at index 2. This is what, yeah, it's correct, right? So it gets the things by index, and then This is the first thing, the welcome message, this. And then this, for the nested things, it plays with snippets, because let's see here, because depending on the language, a translator may need to swap different parts of the string. So you cannot see it here, but you can see it here. Yeah. So for example, let's say, at least for this example, we just have one tag, but if we have multiple tags, we could have another one here with one, like this. Right? So when we have multiple tags, depending on the language, some parts of the string may need to be swapped, and the translator may swap them to conform to the language's rules. And Wuchale tries, Wuchale handles that by creating snippets, and then at render time, it could just render the snippets according to the translation's order. So that's how it stays compliant to the language's rules. The translator has full freedom to reorder anything as long as it's equivalent, right? As long as it's equivalent, they have full freedom to translate it the most appropriate way for the language. So it plays with snippets, and then it gives it to a component. If you want to see the component, it's in the source, but the component is what renders the snippets and the strings according to the order they appear in the compiled catalog. I mean, according to the order the translator intended, right? And then lastly, the plural, this is what it turns to, right? We defined the function with an optional parameter for the rule here, and then it provides the rule as a third argument and the candidates as the second argument. The candidates are inside of the compiled catalog. They're located at index 3, and at index 3 we should find, from after 2, this is the last, index 3 is this one, and inside of there we have two elements, undia and these many dias, right? Yeah, that's it. So this is what plurals look like, and the transformed file looks like, and now we can continue, right? The next biggest feature that took a lot of time to implement is URLs, right? So URLs are supported in the same spirit, being less invasive, requiring less work, right? So what you have to do for them is configure first. Of course, we have full control. You have full control, but you have to decide which paths get translated and which paths don't, right? So let's see here, URL, and we configure two things. One is localize. We could set it to true, or we could give it a module path that exports a localize function. But basically, what this does is encode the local information inside of the URL in some way. So when you set it to true, this means, for example, let's say if we have a about page, like the basic thing is this, then when it runs through, to localize means to encode the locale inside of the path. For example, in this case, by the default localizer, that would be yes about. So we put the locale somewhere so that we could extract it later, right? So, but when it's done with the translation, that would be, I don't know, as something like this. Like URLs go through two things. One is translation and the other is localization. So when it goes through both, it becomes something like this, like from this to this, right? So we just go with the default, and then next we define the patterns. And after a recent change, previously we used the path to regex package like this. Yeah, this one. I mean, it's a good package. This one. Yeah. Initially, this was what was used, but after checking how kind of heavy it is, because it's a general purpose pattern matcher, and for this case it's kind of an overkill. And so a new pattern matcher that's based on globe patterns was developed and included inside of Wuchale. No dependency, and it's much faster when matching, because it needs, the matcher needs to run on every request, right? So when a request comes, the URL has to be translated back to the original path so that we could serve the appropriate page based on our original code, right? So we define the patterns. So let's say we have something like, we'll add it later, but for now, about, let's create an about page, right? We could, this string can be a globe pattern, like it can be something like this or something like this. Like the, you can check out the documentation, but it can be something like this. Like it looks like globe, but it's just there to express the patterns you want translated. And those patterns, that those URLs they're not matching, will be excluded from translation or localization in any way. And then for now, let's go with about, and then yeah, we'll also, yeah, we'll go, actually now finally we'll go from the query parameter to proper URL path, uh, localized URL path. Now we have configured it, and then we should just create, let's see, roots. Now we have layout and page. Let's create about, and in about, let's create yeah. So let's have something like this. Just to identify it. Now we have our component, and from the main page, from here, let's link to it. So we don't need the plurals, we just need a link. So about, yeah. Now, uh, yes, uh, uh, yeah. Now we're on the English page. Now we have to wait. I'm forgetting some details. Yeah, here. Yeah, this is about the patterns, and you can use. I have to update this, and yeah, um, yeah, it is already extracted, but this is, yeah, this should be different. But maybe Gemini thinks it should be the same. I don't know, but it should work. Ah, yes, we have to go to, yes, wait. Ah, yeah, that's what I forgot. We have to put something inside of the hooks here. We have to use this because we have to reroute based on the translation. We didn't set that up. Okay. All right. So not single main, and yeah, this is already paired. Yeah, and yeah. So now one thing we have to know is we have configured inside of our configuration that we use the default localize, right? So we have to delocalize it when the request comes, and we have to find the original path. We have to delocalize it, and to get that, we have to use the same the corresponding delocalize function. So if we use the default localize function, we can use the default delocalize function. Um, but if you implement your own localize function, you also have to implement your own delocalize function that reverses the process. So the default one is provided from Wuchale itself. Uh, inside of there, inside of the reroute hook, you can delocalize it, and then you get the locale and the unlocalized path. And this is still not the original path because it's still the translated one. But and then from there you can use this. You can use the match URL. So what this does is it takes the incoming URL and then tries to find the corresponding original path, and then it gives you the path, the original path, and then now we can return the path, or if we couldn't find anything, we could just return the incoming path name. So this is everything we need. Now you can serve, yeah, just in case. Now I can serve ES. No. I'm still missing something. Oh wait, this should be in hooks. Okay, it's not. It's a lot of details. All right. So not in hooks server. So yeah, this should be here and here and this here. I mean, reroute should be in hooks. That's a SvelteKit rule. And handle should be in hooks server. Yeah. Now it works. All right. I apologize. Yeah, this is a bit embarrassing. Sorry. All right. So this is setup.
By
Yeah,
the way,
we have to restart.
just to intervene, don't worry. Like that's absolutely like it's like the demo day is
Yeah,
always a bit problematic.
yeah, it should have worked. I don't know.
No worries, no
Wait.
worries. I mean, I guess like the point
Yeah,
is,
now it worked.
yeah, okay.
Now it works. All right. So yeah, if we go to US, for some reason, well, you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
It didn't get translated. Wait. Yeah, this should be here. But yeah, this is another debugging session. Where, yeah, I don't want to take a lot of time debugging, but this is the idea, right?
Yeah.
So the one of the last things is yeah, as you saw, you can store this value, the locale, inside of the URL path, or you could choose to store it anywhere else inside of local storage or inside of session storage. I don't know if that works, but yeah, you could store it anywhere. You just need to provide it when you load the catalogs like this. You just need to provide it here. One, inside for the server, you always provide all of the locales, but for the browser loading, you have to give it here, here. So you could get the value from anywhere. You just have to provide the value here when loading, and uh, you're free to store it anywhere. Now, for the CLI is another story. Here, it supports not just extraction and translation. You can also use it to check the status. You could also use it to check. Check means two things. One is the extracted character, like without any arguments, without any flags, it just extracts. And oh wait, we're in another directory. Yeah, it just extracts, right? But if you give it, if you say status, it tells you the status. So total, it gives you some overview. So we have two loaders, main and JS, and for the main file, the for the client, the loader used is this one. For the server, the loader used is this one. And you could go and edit it and set it as custom, but just information. And the number of messages, total messages, is 10. And out of those, one is URL, the one we just added. And then, uh, yeah, there are 5 obsolete messages for English and Spanish. There is no untranslated. All of them were translated during dev. And the JS one, for the JS adapter, there are there are other loader files for the client this and the server this, and then the storage is actually shared with main. You could share storages. By storage, I mean the PO files, but not specifically PO files. That's one of the last things I want to talk about. But yeah, the messages are stored in the same file for both of them. So the JS files store the messages inside of these PO files. So these files are shared between those two um, adapters. But what do you mean by storage? Storage is also something that can be customized. By default, of course, it uses PO files because they're really good standards, but there are some limitations. The first limitation is they are multiple files, one per locale. So if you target 10 languages, you will definitely have 10 files. That may or may not be a problem for you, but some people like it, some people don't like it. It's not up to me to decide. And then the second, maybe probably a very important limitation, if your original language, the source language, is not English or is a language that's not covered by the languages that have just two forms of plural translations. So that already support that is that means many languages fall into two plural forms, one and many, like English, but some languages have way more than two plural forms, as I learned during this project. Uh, so Arabic has 6, Slavic languages have 4, I'm not sure, but not just 2, right? So if the language you use, the human language you use to author your components, your source files, is has more plural forms than 2, then PO files will be problematic because the design is not the design is centered around English. So the design thinking at the time they were created was source files are always going to be written in English, and the translations are the only thing that needs to be considering many more plural forms. So if you use plurals and the language has more plural forms, PO files may be a pain. So for that reason, there is a storage interface implemented, and PO file is just one implementation of it. So yeah, here you could follow this and implement your own storage. But as an example, a JSON storage is implemented. It it supports storing all of the translations in a single file, and it's already provided as Wuchale slash JSON here, like this. So you could install it and swap it for PO files inside of your, again, configuration. And the configuration is per adapter. So you could use PO files for one, for JS, for example, storage would be PO file. And yeah, PO file is included by default inside of Wuchale, but you could import or implement your own storage mechanism. So if you want, you could also store it online and in an API somewhere, right? And it can talk to it directly while you develop, or you can implement anything, right? And even to customize where the PO files are stored, you could also use this. So you could configure, you could call it here and then configure it location, and you could give it a source some other place and local.po. You could configure it like this, where the PO files live. So you now have the basic idea. So in all, uh, I want to give you the tools, but I don't want to be on your way when you want to do something, right? That's the philosophy, if you will, right? So that's all. Thank you. I hope you understood. I'm not good at presenting things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And thank you